What is really bad for women's hormones is
Gin Stephens is a best-selling author and is the woman who turned intermittent fasting into a global movement. This conversation isn't just about food windows. It's about hormone freedom and redefining our relationship with our bodies.
I was obese. I'm 5'5", I weigh 210 pounds, and so that was in the obese category. And I literally tried everything over the years. Nothing was ever sustainable. You lose weight, boom, there's all the weight back plus more. First heard about intermittent fasting probably around 2009. Our body needs a break from digesting food, and just that overnight period of sleep is not really long enough for most of us. Everyone is constantly in that surge of boosting and crashing and boosting and crashing. Bitter flavor profile does not stimulate the cephalic-phase insulin response.
Hi there, I'm Leah, and welcome to the House of Hormones podcast. Gin Stephens, thank you so much for joining us on the House of Hormones. For our listeners and anyone who doesn't know you or hasn't come across you on social media or read your book, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a teacher at heart, and I will always be a teacher. I was a classroom teacher for 28 years and retired in 2018. So you might be wondering, why is a teacher talking about intermittent fasting? And so it's just because I have found intermittent fasting to be the most profound change in my life. I lost 80 pounds with intermittent fasting over 10 years ago. So I've kept it off as I've gone through menopause. I'm 55, about to turn 56, and I am an intermittent fasting advocate for so many reasons. But the teacher in me is unable to not teach people about things that I find to be valuable. So I have turned my teaching career into a different kind of career where I teach people how to live an intermittent fasting lifestyle that works for them. And there's not one size fits all way to do intermittent fasting. And, as a teacher, I taught students at all different levels who needed different support in the classroom. And the same is true with my work now with intermittent fasting. I empower people to develop an intermittent fasting approach that works for them, their unique body, their food preferences, their lifestyle, and help them figure out what is it that their body needs.
So you mentioned losing 80 pounds. Was that the start of your journey with intermittent fasting, or what was it that brought you to intermittent fasting?
Well, it was absolutely the need to lose weight. I was obese. I'm 5'5", I weigh 210 pounds, and so that was in the obese category. And I started struggling with my weight. Really, like the first time I needed to diet was college. I gained the freshman 15, and that started the years of diet roller coaster, up and down and up and down. And I literally tried everything over the years. Nothing was ever sustainable. Nothing ever gave me weight loss that didn't come right back, right? It's a story that everyone probably can identify with. You work so hard, you white knuckle it, you lose weight, you release just a little bit, and then boom, there's all the weight back plus more. So I was very diet focused because I was like, it shouldn't be this hard. Why is it such a challenge? And I was always looking at what was out there. I literally would go to the diet and weight loss section of Amazon or my local bookstore, and I would browse what was new, what was out there, looking for something that would finally work for me and allow me just to live my life without feeling focused on that yo-yo of ups and downs. And so I first heard about intermittent fasting probably around 2009. There were a few things out at that time. And of course, we didn't know as much as we know now about how intermittent fasting works in the body. Pretty much everyone who was talking about it in the early days just said, oh, it's a way to, eat fewer calories, and that's why you lose the weight. Now we know it's so much more. It affects us at deep levels. There's so much more to it than just that you're, eating fewer calories. But I immediately thought, you're just changing when you're eating. You're changing the timing of your eating. That sounds interesting. But of course, we didn't understand things like becoming fat adapted or, flipping the metabolic switch and the adjustment period. I mean, so many things that I now understand and I teach to people. But whenever I would try it, over those years from 2009 to 2014, I was cycling between one diet and the next, but I would come back to one of those intermittent fasting approaches, but I never gave it time. I would try it for a week and then I would go out of town and stop doing it, or I would dabble in it
Yeah.
here and there. And it never stuck. Now I understand why. It never felt like a lifestyle.
That's because you were kind of approaching it as would anybody with a fad diet, right? So that's
Yeah,
kind of that was the cycle that you were on, finding new fad diets, finding
exactly.
new things, that quick fixes, always looking for the quick fix.
Right. That's a great way of putting it. I did want a quick fix. I wanted a quick fix, and then I would get down to my goal weight and I would just magically stay there. That's what I had in my mind. I remember the minute I realized that wasn't true, I was talking to my stepmother, is before intermittent fasting, and I was doing some crazy like diet where you went and got weight loss shots at the doctor's office, not the same shots that are out now. This was earlier. And I was like, I'm almost at my goal. Thinking that was the finish line, right? And she said, well, the hard part starts after you get to the goal, maintaining your weight. And I got so mad that she said that. And I'm like, you're wrong. Of course, she was right. The minute I stopped doing that diet program from the doctor's office, of course, I gained it all back and then more. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't a lifestyle. And I was like, she was right. Darn it. And that's how intermittent fasting has been different. I lost the weight, got to my goal in 2015, continued to lose more fat over the next couple of years, get a little bit smaller, a little bit leaner as I continued to live the lifestyle. But I haven't had the regain. I haven't ever had to go out and buy bigger clothes. I haven't, had the yo-yo. This is the first time in my life that I haven't had that lose the weight, gain it all back plus more cycle. I lost the weight and I've kept it off within my maintenance range. And I've kept it off as of this recording over 10 years. I've been in my maintenance range comfortably. So, you can tell it's not a fad and it's not a quick fix. This is the solution that I was looking for all along.
I think it would be important to say, and I'm sure you would completely agree, but it's important to say to anyone that's listening, for your journey, and probably most people who are successful with intermittent fasting, it may start at weight loss, but then it's not just about weight loss. And I know we're going to go in and talk a lot about this, but obviously somewhere in there, your goal changed. So instead of just having a goal to be a certain weight, I bet your goal changed to feel a certain way and live and eat certain things and be healthy, right? Would I be right?
Well, I like to call intermittent fasting the health plan with the side effect of weight loss. And, so many of us come to intermittent fasting for the weight loss, but we stick around for the health benefits. And it was really, I'd already gotten to my goal weight. And still, obviously we know that when we're in a healthy weight range, no matter how you get there, when you're in a healthy weight range, you're setting yourself up for a healthier future, right? But we didn't really understand, again, how intermittent fasting was special until 2016. And suddenly in 2016, everything kind of opened up. And we understood intermittent fasting was so much more than just a way to lose weight and then be healthy. And it was because the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2016 was awarded to a Japanese researcher who was researching something I had never heard of prior to this coming out. And it's the word autophagy. I'm sure you've heard the word autophagy by this point. But autophagy is a body process where our body cleans up old cellular junk, basically. It's our body's recycling and upcycling system. And many things in our life can stimulate increased autophagy: exercise, black coffee, drinking some right now, certain foods. But one thing that powerfully stimulates autophagy is fasting.
Yeah.
And so suddenly we're like, wait a minute. When we take a break from eating and we give our body time, it can initiate certain cellular housekeeping processes that it can't do when you're all the time digesting and dealing with food coming in. Like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Our body needs a break from digesting food, and just that overnight period of sleep is not really long enough for most of us. So we know that autophagy generally, as we grow older, declines. And so what can we do to keep the process going strong? Well, turns out intermittent fasting is one of the best things you can do for that. So as soon as we understood that, it really changed. Oh, I'm not just doing intermittent fasting to maintain my weight. I'm doing it because it's very, very healthy.
What I have noticed, the more that I learn about intermittent fasting, is a lot of the time people start noticing that themselves. So they might have come into it for weight loss or for various other reasons, but the health benefits and like autophagy, but also like they start to feel them. And they become addicted to them. So people become addicted to the clarity, you know what I mean? So the benefits that they'll get when certain things kick in after certain many hours of fasting. Does that make sense? I'll let you explain that better than I've just explained it. But people do become addicted to how they feel, don't they?
Well, you feel so good. And that, in contrast to how you used to feel before you started, you might not have even realized how draggy you felt during the day. I can remember, let's go back to before I started intermittent fasting, I was a teacher. And we all had been told, literally from the minute we were children, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Start the day with a good breakfast. You need to eat frequent small meals to keep up your energy and also to keep your metabolism up. We've been told all those things. And so I'm somebody who's like, well, that sounds good. And I like to eat, so why not? So I would start my day with breakfast before I went to work. And then I would have a latte. And if I was dieting, it would be a low-fat latte with sugar-free sweetener in it, right? Because it's low calorie or 0 calories. And then I would be hungry mid-morning and I would need a snack. And then I would be hungry again and it's lunchtime. And now I'm hungry in the afternoon. And then I have another latte because I'm having the afternoon slump. Then I would get home from work and I needed a little nap before I had the energy to make dinner for my family. Then I would make dinner and then I would just sit on the couch and I felt so draggy. And, we're used to the idea that we need that pick me up. We need they have the little energy drinks at every gas station. Everyone is constantly in that surge of boosting and crashing and boosting and crashing. But with intermittent fasting, your body learns to flip the metabolic switch to fat burning, to burning the stored fuel that's in your body. And we've got all sorts of stored fuel right this minute. You've got glycogen in your liver. You've got glycogen in your muscles. Your body knows how to get to that. Getting to your stored fat is the trick. And people who are doing that typical, low calorie eating all day diet, like the way I used to eat, you're constantly up and down, but when you start to feel down, your body is not like, great, now I'm going to burn some fat, and then you feel great again. No, your body's like, send down some more quick energy, and so you do, and that keeps you on that cycle. But when you're fat adapted, when you have gotten to a state where your insulin is low because you're fasting clean, I can talk more about that later, your body has developed the ability to tap into your fat stores, you're fat adapted. In other words, your body's like, okay, I'm running out of quick fuel in my blood. My blood glucose is a little lower than it could be. So you could eat something and you're like, nope, I'm not eating right now. And then your body's like, fine, I'll use some of this fat that's stored on my body. So your body flips that metabolic switch, starts burning stored fat, and you don't have the up and down anymore. You stay steady. So every day when your body flips that metabolic switch, you have so much stored fuel on your body that you can tap into. And so you don't have the crashes. You don't feel hangry. And that is what is so different. I don't feel the need to have something in the morning as a snack or lunch and then afternoon pick me up. I'm not having the crashes throughout the day. It's that steady mental clarity, the steady energy of a body that is not only well fueled from all that stored fuel we have on our bodies at all times, but also a body that knows how to access it. That's where the magic comes in. And once your body can do that, then you know, okay, I've found the secret. I'm going to feel great every day instead of those ups and downs.
I think one of the things that I've learned, because of course this is a controversial topic and lots of people have a lot of things to say about it. Okay. I know, and I think sometimes because, so you're talking there and you naturally go to breakfast and you're talking about breakfast because one of the easiest ways to do intermittent fasting is to basically push back breakfast, and it's one of the more popular ways and a lot of people do that. However, of course, there's a lot of doctors speaking about cortisol levels in women. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about hormones in a while and all these types of things. But what we also know is everybody, so for our listeners listening, some of them will be thinking, there's no way I could miss breakfast. And that's okay. So what you're giving is an example of what works for you. And what we're talking about here is an example of fasting for a certain amount of hours. But if some people have a different schedule and it doesn't work for them to skip breakfast, or if breakfast is their most cherished meal of the day, that's fine. So maybe, you stop eating earlier, or, we're basically talking about the window. So it doesn't matter what meal you kind of push or shift around, right? But often too many people will home in on the fact that you've used breakfast as an example, and they're like, but I love breakfast, so I could never do this. Ever feel like your mind's in a fog, or you just can't focus the way you used to? You're not alone. Love Mushrooms Lion's Mane and Ashwagandha blend with added B12 and D3 is designed to support your everyday well-being, helping you feel clear, calm, and ready for whatever the day brings. Lion's Mane is celebrated for its traditional use in supporting clarity and focus. Ashwagandha is known for helping you feel steady and balanced, and with essential B12 and D3, you're nourishing your body and mind every day. Because you deserve to feel your best, sharp, balanced, and at ease. And as a House of Hormones listener, you can get 10% off your first order with House 10. That's code House 10. So why don't you head to lovemushrooms.co.uk?
Well, here's the key about that. When you're coming into it from the beginning, probably everybody is used to eating breakfast. So probably everybody thinks they love breakfast and they think they need breakfast. So I would like everybody who's coming in with any kind of preconceived notion, well, I couldn't skip breakfast. I couldn't. I've tried it before. I felt terrible. Of course you did. You weren't fat adapted. Your body wasn't skilled at tapping into your fat stores. You might have even tried intermittent fasting, but you weren't fasting clean, and then you felt terrible. More about that in a minute. If you're not fasting clean, you're missing out on that metabolic switch that your body can do. And so I would like everyone to get all of those preconceived notions of, well, I've tried to skip breakfast, I can't. I heard it was bad to skip breakfast. I heard a doctor theoretically say that if you're going to have an eating window, it's better to have it in the morning. Let's throw all the theory away and just focus on it's got to be sustainable for you. Okay. Back when I was writing Fast, Feast, Repeat, which is my New York Times bestseller, it came out in 2020. At the time, I was running some very large Facebook groups, and I put out a survey just to see, what eating window timing works best for you. I put this in, I had a group that was like a smaller group. It's called the Advanced Group. And so I asked them, and people, it wasn't like, a scientific survey. It was just me asking some people who filled out the little survey. And we found that the vast majority of people do prefer to have the later in the day, afternoon to evening eating window. That's what I do. I'm about 2 to 7. That's what works best for me. There was a smaller group of people who like a midday window. Maybe they stop eating around 2 or 3 for the day and they're done. So depending on the length of their window would determine when they start. And a tiny little minority of people like to have a morning window. And so I want everyone, if you're thinking about intermittent fasting, throw what you think is true for you out the window and let your body adapt. And then you'll be able to very easily figure out what works for you. As far as the theories about cortisol and all of that, we don't have to guess about that. We can have those numbers checked. Like, for example, you will often hear a blanket statement, like you said, not eating in the morning makes your cortisol go crazy or something, or like if you do intermittent fasting, your cortisol is going to go through the roof. Well, you would say I have plenty of experience. And if intermittent fasting made cortisol go nuts, or if an evening eating window was terrible for your cortisol, I would have that data showing, yeah, it's true, my cortisol is bad. Well, I have the opposite data. I've had my cortisol checked, and my cortisol is on the low end of the optimal range. So I don't have to worry, oh my gosh, am I damaging my cortisol? I know I'm not, because I have the data. So when people start to worry about things like, is this going to make my cortisol go crazy? Try it. Get the testing done. You will know. You don't have to say, well, I saw somebody on Instagram put a reel up about this. Literally anybody can say anything on Instagram. That doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could go on Instagram and say, no one will ever have a cortisol problem if they do intermittent fasting. That would be not true. Someone could,
Yeah.
depending on how you're choosing to live your life. There's a whole lot more going on in your day than just, when you're eating. A lot of things impact cortisol, your stress level, exercise, your sleep. So when it comes to finding an intermittent fasting window that works for you, I believe that every single person can tell what works for them because it feels good. If I were to wake up in the morning and have a 5-hour window that started at 8 a.m., for an example, so that would be 8 to 1. Doing the math here, counting it up. 8 to 1, closing my window at 1. I would be so hungry before I went to bed that I would feel miserable and I would want to eat again, and I probably would eat again, and there it went. I didn't do it that day because I was starving. So I have adjusted to a window timing that means I never have to feel starving and miserable ever.
Yeah.
And that for me is 2 to 7. Works beautifully. I never am starving and miserable, and it's a lifestyle. So I want everyone listening to feel empowered to find the window that works for them, that feels good. Your body will tell you.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think you've mentioned two things that are really poignant there. Firstly, you've said just try it. It is something that's really, like, it's free to try. It almost costs you less. So it is free to try. It's not something that you're asking.
It does cost you less.
Yeah. So, but everybody can try it. And what you're saying is measure it yourself. You will be able to tell. And people are really scared to try. From what I've seen, people are really scared to try intermittent fasting because they fear being really hungry. And actually, the whole point is to do it so you're not really hungry. And people don't realize that by doing it, you're not going to be. So as long as you're doing it properly. You've mentioned your book, Fast, Feast, Repeat. And you've talked a little bit about clean fasting here and also in your book. Can you tell us a bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes. And the clean fast really is the key to not being starving and miserable. And that's the Jen Stevens difference when it comes to fasting, is the clean fast. Because, before, when I began, obviously everyone was like, oh, it allows you to eat fewer calories. That's all you're doing. And it wasn't until I read the obesity code that came out in 2016 when I realized there's so much more going on than just the number of calories that you're putting into your body and how you spread them out throughout the day. And Dr. Jason Fung taught me in that book about insulin. And insulin is a hormone, and it does so many things in our body, but it also has to do with what our blood sugar is doing. It's probably what everyone has heard of it. If someone's diabetic, they need to take insulin to control their blood sugar, that sort of thing. But insulin, if you just think about it in a blanket way, just oversimplify it a little bit, insulin is a storage hormone. When it goes up, our body is in storage mode. And when it goes down, our body can then start to use what's already there. So if you just think about it like that, one word for what insulin does, insulin is anti-lipolytic. That's a big science word. Anti-lipolytic. That means insulin, it's a storage hormone. It's for storing. We eat, insulin goes up, our body stores it. That makes perfect sense. It's how even a child could understand that. Well, anti-lipolytic means works against fat burning. So when insulin is high, you're storing. You're not really burning fat because your body's doing something else right then. So you can't be in a fat storing mode and also efficiently burning fat at the same time. So when I read the obesity code, Jason Fung really talked about insulin and how it keeps us from tapping into our fat stores. And so then I realized, we want to keep insulin low. And while we're fasting, that's really important. Well, he taught me something in that book that was really the key to the clean fast, and that was the cephalic phase insulin response. And I have a blog post that goes into more detail at jenstevens.com about insulin. And, not everyone is like, it doesn't matter, insulin's no big deal. It is. It makes a really big deal. If you have, for example, let's talk about a diet soda. If you drink a diet soda, or if I had like artificial sweetener in my coffee right now, it would add a sweet taste. And so our brains perceive the sweetness when it hits our taste buds. That's the cephalic brain response. So your brain says, oh, something sweet's coming in. We know what that is. That means we're going to have blood sugar going up. We need insulin to manage that increase in blood sugar. So your body pumps out some insulin. That's the cephalic phase insulin response. All it takes is a sweet taste to set this into motion. So imagine I'm drinking this coffee and imagine that it had sweetener in it and I'm sipping it over like a 2-hour period. Every time I taste the sweetness, my brain says, oh, we got blood sugar about to go up. We need some insulin. And so you're keeping your insulin going up, up, up. They did a fascinating study with rats where they gave the rats sweeteners. They painted their oral cavity with different types of sweeteners, and they were able to measure the cephalic phase insulin response. Insulin went up. So then, and of course, these were rats. They couldn't do this in people, but they cut the nerve that gave the message from the tongue to the brain, and then they repeated the experiment. No insulin response because the brain did not perceive the sweetness.
Wow.
So we know now that we need to so we have 3 fasting goals. One of them for the clean fast. One of them is to keep insulin low while we're fasting. And we don't want to keep having that cephalic insulin response over and over. So we stick to black coffee. Black coffee has a bitter flavor profile. So a bitter flavor profile does not stimulate the cephalic phase insulin response. We stick to plain water, plain sparkling water, or plain actual tea. And when I say tea, I'm not talking about those 5,000 products that are on the tea aisle that are herbal tea or apple cinnamon tea or, chai tea. I'm talking about actual tea from tea leaves. And so, you can have that bitter flavor profile from actual tea or black coffee. Those should not stimulate an insulin response. So we're keeping our insulin low while we're fasting. So we're not in storage mode. We're able to, okay, now we can get to all that stored fat that our body can access. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have to stop you on the tea point. So, are you saying...
Okay. Oh gosh, I'm betting you drink a tea that is not clean fast.
Well,
approved.
I feel like we need to clarify this for everybody because I feel like there will be a lot of questions around this, and I feel like there'll be a lot of people that think they're still fasting because they're having a black tea. So,
yeah,
I mean, for example,
a black tea is fine.
Yeah, but what about so you mentioned chai tea and you mentioned fruit teas and...
Okay, here's what you want to avoid. Let me just tell you. You want to avoid anything that has a food-like flavor. So that would include spices. You don't want to include anything that is fruity or sweet. So when you start thinking about all the herbal teas in the world, like for example, lemongrass tea. Well, that's got a fruity kind of a flavor. Or like Earl Grey tea. Well, that's got bergamot, which is a citrus. That's fruity. We don't want that. Or you might think chamomile. Well, chamomile has a sweet flavor profile. What about, you could just go on and on and on.
It's so important because lots of people would have a chamomile tea at night.
Right. Save that for your eating window. You just don't have it while you're fasting. So for anybody who's listening, like we said before, people who are like, it's just too hard. I can't skip breakfast. I can't do it. It's too hard. Were you truly fasting clean? That chamomile tea, you might think, well, that's just dumb, Jen. That is ridiculous. There is no way that my 0-calorie chamomile tea is making this hard for me. Well, I have something in Fast Feast Repeat called the Clean Fast Challenge. It's fine to think I am just ridiculous, but you can believe how you feel. So give yourself 30 days. You can do it for 30 days. Just say, I'm going to prove that Jen is wrong, but I'm going to do it her way. 30 days, fast clean, with nothing but actual tea. It can be black tea, it can be green tea, as long as it's just tea, not anything added. Don't put a little nut pod in there with the creamer. Don't put a splash of cream. Don't put sweetener in. Don't get your flavored coffee like your, hazelnut. That's a food flavor. So black coffee, plain tea, plain water, no fruit in there. Don't put a little lemon in it. Plain. Don't put a little apple cider vinegar in it. Those are all food flavors. Do it for 30 days. And then you will feel so different that you will not want to go back. And the reason I know this is because I've done this for so many years. I've been running, I started with Facebook communities that I started in 2015. So it's been 10 years since I've been working with people. After I read the obesity code and understood the role of insulin and came up with the clean fast terminology. There are so many people. Y'all are about to see a cat. I think my cat just jumped up on the computer table. She's keeping low under the radar. But there have been so many people who have said, oh my gosh, I didn't think my morning mug of chai tea could possibly be a problem. And I cut it out. And now the fast is effortless. And I don't need to eat at noon. I can go till 2 and it's so easy. And so again, I'm not asking you to blindly believe me. Try it. And you will be so surprised at the difference.
Ever feel like your mind's in a fog or you just can't focus the way you used to? You're not alone. Love Mushrooms Lion's Mane and Ashwagandha blend with added B12 and D3 is designed to support your everyday well-being, helping you feel clear, calm, and ready for whatever the day brings. Lion's Mane is celebrated for its traditional use in supporting clarity and focus. Ashwagandha is known for helping you feel steady and balanced. And with essential B12 and D3, you're nourishing your body and mind every day. Because you deserve to feel your best, sharp, balanced, and at ease. And as a House of Hormones listener, you can get 10% off your first order with House 10. That's code House 10. So why don't you head to lovemushrooms.co.uk.
Give yourself 30 days, though, and it might be harder at first.
And I just want to clarify that because the tea is a big thing here in the UK, especially. So you have mentioned green tea and black tea. So English breakfast tea, fine. Green tea, fine. Anything
That's
else?
fine.
Absolutely not.
It's pretty simple if you read the ingredients. And like the tea leaf is from a very specific plant. And they do a lot of things with the tea leaf. Sometimes they ferment it or they do this or they do that. But if it's just actual tea, the Camilla scent, I can't remember the name of it, but y'all can look that up. Whatever the actual plant is, if it's made from that, it's fine. There's like one herbal tea, yerba mate, that I think is probably also fine for the clean fast because it has a bitter flavor profile. And so that bitter flavor, just keep that in your mind. You want water or tea or coffee with a bitter flavor profile. If you're not sure if your herbal tea would qualify, then look up the tasting profile. If it's like sweet and fruity, you can be like, okay, no, that's not the one I want for the fast.
I want to move on and talk a little bit about hormones. So hormonal health is a central theme, obviously, on our podcast and in everything we do here at the House of Hormones. How does intermittent fasting intersect hormonal balance, and particularly for women? So leaning more into women's health here. What effect do you see that it has on women's hormones?
Well, let's just talk broadly for a minute about what is really bad for women's hormones. And what is really bad for women's hormones is over-restriction, over-exercising, getting into that deep, deep stress response where you're like just really not nourishing your body well. Like, for example, I have a good friend. Her name is Dr. Tabitha Barber. She's an OBGYN, and she's a functional medicine doctor, and hormones are her specialty. And she also guides women through intermittent fasting. But my co-host Sherry and I had her come on our podcast, Fast, Feast, Repeat, to talk about this very concept. So again, I am not a hormone expert, but I know people who are. And so I trust what they tell me. And I also trust my own experience. But Tabitha Barber gave an example of Olympic athletes. Women who are Olympic athletes often lose their periods because they are eating a very, very prescriptive way to keep their body very, very lean. They get to a very low body fat percentage, and they're following their training regimen. That is very stressful for a woman's body, and they will lose their periods. So that is an example of what I mean by, for women, we do not want to overly restrict, not nourish our bodies well, over exercise.
Yeah.
And I want you to apply that statement to anything that you're doing, whether it's intermittent fasting or a low-calorie diet. I'll tell you what was more stressful for my body hormonally than intermittent fasting. And that was when I tried to follow a 1,200 calorie a day diet where I was like eating all day long, tiny little amounts of food. And now that we understand insulin being anti-lipolytic, not allowing you to tap into your fat stores well. So imagine I get up in the morning, I eat a little tiny breakfast bar that's 120 calories, and I'm drinking my diet soda. First of all, that's not enough fuel for my body. But now I'm keeping that insulin up just enough that my body can't really get to my stored fat very well. And I'm so hungry that I'm drinking that diet soda all the time just to keep myself from eating, because I'm thinking it's helping, but really it's making it worse.
Yeah.
So in that regard, my body is not well fueled because I'm not eating very much, but it's also not well fueled because it can't get into the stored fuel that's already there on my body. So now let's contrast that with intermittent fasting. I'm fasting clean. My body is well fueled because it can flip the metabolic switch and get to the fuel that's on my body already. And then when I open my window, I am not overly restricting or dieting. So you can see the big difference. Even if I only ate 1,200 calories in my window, which of course I don't do. I don't recommend that women do an ultra low calorie diet coupled with intermittent fasting. Our goal is to eat until we're satisfied within our window and nourish our body well. But you can see the difference just right there. When have we ever heard eating a 1,200 calorie a day diet is bad for women's hormones? No one says that. But somehow, the idea that if you're fasting, that's bad for you. It doesn't make sense when you think about it like that. Like these new diet shots and diet drugs, the GLP-1 drugs that so many people are using. I have never once heard someone say the starvation level diet that women are on when they're using the GLP-1s is bad for women's hormones. But yet, knowing what we know about how over-restriction is bad for women's hormones, those programs are putting you on a starvation level diet because you have no appetite. Yeah, you're going to lose a lot of weight doing that. A lot of it, you'll lose muscle, you'll lose fat too. But there's so many things that are bad for women's hormones. But intermittent fasting in a way where you are not over-restricting, you're nourishing your body well, you are fasting clean, you still are getting your period, unless you're after menopause like me. My friend Tabitha said your period is like your one of your vital signs. If you are still cycling prior to menopause and perimenopause, then you're not damaging your hormones. It's only a problem if you're over-restricting to the point that your body's like, oh gosh, panic mode. But you could do that with a standard low-calorie diet and too much CrossFit, for example. That is not good for you.
Yeah.
So I hope that really helps. Is intermittent fasting bad for women's hormones? It is not. And one other point that I would like to make is it actually can really be beneficial for women's hormones, especially for any woman who has PCOS. We know that PCOS is on the rise. It's everywhere. Like I'd never even heard of PCOS until I was probably, in my 40s. We were not talking about it. People weren't being diagnosed with it all around me. Maybe people had it and they just weren't diagnosed. I'm not really sure. But PCOS is linked to high insulin levels.
Yeah.
So early in my Intermittent Fasting Stories podcast, I had an OBGYN on the show. Her name was Dr. Cecily Ganhart. And she is an OBGYN who helps women with fertility issues. And of course, one of the main reasons that her patients are having trouble with fertility is PCOS. Well, guess what she uses to restore fertility in those PCOS patients? Intermittent fasting.
Wow.
So she'll have them do intermittent fasting, keep their insulin low, and they're able to conceive. So it breaks my heart that there is such a pervasive, loud voice of a few voices out there that are being listened to that are convincing women that this is somehow going to be bad for you. So what was bad for me? Weighing 210 pounds and needing to take naps every afternoon and not being able to move my body? Or I'm a vibrant, healthy, almost 56-year-old I mean, it doesn't even make sense that intermittent fasting has hurt me, right?
Yeah. So I just want to dig into that a little bit more. So you mentioned PCOS, and
Okay.
we talk a lot about that at the
Right.
hormones. Okay. We get so many questions about it. We've spoken a lot about it on the podcast with different people who really suffer from it. So let's add in intermittent fasting to that with PCOS. As a bit of advice for someone with PCOS, where would they start with intermittent fasting? So it's great to say, hey, do some intermittent fasting if you've got PCOS and see how that helps with fertility or maybe even just your symptoms. But where would they start? For you and I, we could maybe say, would they start with a 16-8? What does that mean to people who know nothing about intermittent fasting?
Okay. That's a great question. That's why I wrote this book, 28-Day Fast Start Day by Day. This is a guide to getting started really for everybody. And you take a little quiz at the beginning. You decide what approach to start with. The goal of the 28-day fast start is to become fat adapted. And that at that point, you can start experimenting to figure out what works. But it's very prescriptive for the first 28 days, depending on what plan you choose. You can also, go between plans. If you pick one that's a little too aggressive, you can ease up. If you pick one that's a little too easy, you can become a little more aggressive. But you follow the plan for 28 days. And that's really the best for everybody. But before you begin, I would highly recommend that everybody get a fasting insulin test and a fasting blood glucose at the same time. So, and you want to be completely fasted before you get that blood work. Don't even have black coffee. Don't have your tea that morning. Just go with just water only and get your fasted blood work. Fasting insulin and fasting blood glucose. Now, I'm not sure of the units that it's reported in the UK. It's different. In the United States, I can just tell you, in the United States, optimal fasting insulin would be between 2.5 and 5. That's what you're looking for
What
optimal.
does
But
that
if someone
mean?
is
And what
overweight
does that
and
mean?
if they have PCOS,
When you say it's optimal, what does that mean within the context of your body?
optimal means you're not insulin resistant, you're insulin sensitive, your body is able to use insulin, produce what's needed. But that's just, an optimal fasting insulin level, 2.5 to 5. Now, when you get it done, you'll see a range that's called normal, that's much wider than that. But when you look around to see people who are around you, do they look optimal? No. Normal people are not optimal right now. And I don't want to be normal. I want to be optimal. So, but you also want to get, like I said, that fasting glucose piece at the same time, because then you can go to Google, search for HOMA IR calculator, HOMA IR. IR stands for insulin resistance. So your HOMA IR calculator, they're online. You just plug in that fasted insulin score. You plug in your fasted glucose score, and it gives you an idea of how insulin resistant you are. Like, for example, if your insulin is sky high and your blood sugar is high, you are insulin resistant.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if your insulin is super, super duper low, but your blood sugar is crazy high, you may be diabetic and not producing insulin in your pancreas. So you can learn a lot by having those two numbers together. But if someone was severely insulin resistant, PCOS people generally are, you would expect to probably see that baseline number, really high insulin, and your blood sugar may be high, maybe it looks normal. But that's why the fasting insulin score is so important, because I read a journal article written, I believe it was written by a nurse practitioner, who was questioning, are we testing the wrong thing? We all go into our doctor and we get an A1C or we get a fasting glucose score. And a lot of times you'll ask your doctor for fasting insulin and they're like, what? No, you don't need that. That's worthless. But this paper that I read, the nurse practitioner was saying, we are testing the wrong thing, because fasting insulin is a leading indicator that your body is having metabolic problems. So like you can have a really high fasting insulin and a normal A1C for a while, because your body is still keeping up with it. You're needing more and more and more insulin as you're becoming insulin resistant, but your body's still doing it. You're keeping your blood sugar down. Eventually, though, your body loses the ability, you become more and more insulin resistant, and then your blood sugars start to go up. So you would have known that if your insulin had been steadily rising over the years, you would have known, I need to get that insulin down, because if this doesn't stop, I'm going to be insulin resistant, or I may become type 2 diabetic. So having that fasting insulin test early is really, really a good thing to have.
How do you see the, intermittent fasting on a broader women's health conversation? Because you've mentioned so many different things there. We've talked about PCOS, we've talked about hormones, we've talked about diabetes, we've talked about, all these different things. So on a real broader conversation, how much does intermittent fasting actually come into it?
I mean, I think it's huge. We're not designed to be digesting and consuming food from sun up to sundown. And we're also not designed to be drinking diet sodas. And we're not designed to be putting in flavor stimulation all the time. And so that leads to just metabolic problems. If, like I said, you look around, you see everybody walking around with their lattes, and they're having their snacks, and they've got their power bar and their protein shake, and becoming more and more metabolically unhealthy, or they are white knuckling it. So we got two things. Either you're white knuckling it and you're miserable and you're starving, but you're managing to keep it under control because just fear, the pure force, you're doing it, right? Or you're having issues in gaining weight. That's pretty much what you could, either or. Most women are one or the other, white knuckling it to stay at their current size, or gaining weight over time. With intermittent fasting, you can let go of that white knuckling, and you relax into the process, and you see, oh, I'm working with my body. So even if someone doesn't need to lose a pound, I have my podcast, Intermittent Fasting Stories, and I've interviewed over 470 people at this point. And, a new episode comes out every week, and they're not all women. Some of them are men. Most of them are women. But there's a common thread through all of the episodes: women, men, younger people, older people. And it is that intermittent fasting has allowed them to get all that food noise, diet noise out of their head and just live. You wake up, you fast clean until you open your window, whatever that is for you. You open your window, you nourish your body well, you close your window. Your body does what it's designed to do, cleans things up during the fast. You feel so good, but you're also not overly consumed with those food thoughts. I think back to when I was prior to intermittent fasting, I was always thinking, is it time to have something else to eat? Could I have something else to eat? Should I? Am I hungry? It was all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And now it's like my window is closed. I'm drinking my coffee. I'm like, oh, have I had enough coffee? Oh, now I'll have some water. No big deal. Am I thirsty? Am I not? Not a problem. Then I notice the clock, and it's 2:00. I'm like, oh, I could eat if I want to. Doesn't mean I have to. I don't run into the kitchen at 2:00 and just start eating. I have that peace. I eat until I'm satisfied. I stop. I close my window. If it's a holiday, maybe I open earlier that day. It's not a big deal. I didn't fall off the wagon. I didn't cheat. I didn't, no. I open earlier because it's a holiday. I often find, though, what's funny is it'll be like Christmas Day, and it'll be the afternoon, and I'm like, oh my Lord, I've been eating all day long. And I'm done. And I'll count back, and it was 8 hours. Like to me, 8 hours felt like so much eating, for the day.
Yeah.
And it's just no struggle, right? You lose that struggle, and the rules and the diet brain is what we call it in my community. So the goal is to live a life that feels good. We are not meant to have a human experience where every moment we hate our bodies and are starving and always making ourselves not eat. When you're fasting, you don't have to force it. It just feels good. And so again, people who, sorry, my cat wants to be on the podcast really badly. For people who haven't experienced it, that first month is not going to feel like that. I talk all about that in 28-Day Fast Start Day by Day. That first month, you're going to feel worse because your body hasn't learned to flip the switch yet. But the best thing to do, listen to intermittent fasting stories. Listen to people tell their stories And
ever feel like your mind's in a fog or you just can't focus the way you used to? You're not alone. Love Mushrooms Lion's Mane and Ashwagandha blend with added B12 and D3 is designed to support your everyday well-being, helping you feel clear, calm, and ready for whatever the day brings. Lion's Mane is celebrated for its traditional use in supporting clarity and focus. Ashwagandha is known for helping you feel steady and balanced. And with essential B12 and D3, you're nourishing your body and mind every day. Because you deserve to feel your best, sharp, balanced, and at ease. And as a House of Hormones listener, you can get 10% off your first order with House 10. That's code House 10. So why don't you head to lovemushrooms.co.uk?
trust that your body can get to that point too.
And I want to just dig in a little bit to what you mean by flip the switch.
Okay. That's that flipping the metabolic switch, where your body is able to tap into your fat stores. When you first start intermittent fasting, you have been used to being on that blood sugar roller coaster where glucose is your primary fuel during the day. And again, you're probably keeping your insulin high because you're probably putting a little artificial sweetener in your tea or putting a few drops of milk in there or whatever it might be. And you're constantly keeping your insulin high, or you're chewing gum, or you're popping in a breath mint, or you're having another snack. So remember what I said before about insulin being anti-lipolytic. High insulin, your body's in storage mode, not tapping into fat stores. Well, I didn't make this up. This is in the science. You can search for it. Insulin anti-lipolytic PubMed.
And how many hours is it before that switch flicks? And what are the signs?
Wouldn't it be nice if there was an answer to that? There's not an answer to that.
I have to ask because I have to ask what people are thinking.
Well, the good news is I do explain all of it in 28-Day Fast Start Day by Day to really help you wrap your mind around flipping that metabolic switch. So when you first start, I want you to think about your liver for a minute. Your liver is full of all sorts of stuff, but imagine it as just the glycogen that's in your liver. That's all we're thinking about right now is the glycogen in your liver, okay? And again, there's so much more going on with your liver, but it's a storage. It stores things. It stores fat. We don't want to have a fatty liver. By the way, fasting is the best thing to clear out a fatty liver. But it also has glycogen. So when you're going along and you're brand new, okay, your body's running along and you're dipping down and your brain's like, okay, I'm hungry. Send something down. If you don't, then your liver will pulse out some glycogen and you'll be running on that stored glycogen. You feel better. You got that glycogen. Eventually, when you've been doing intermittent fasting for 3 weeks, I don't know, whatever. I mean, you're not fasting, you're eating every day, but you know what I mean. When you've been having your daily eating window for 3 weeks and you're fasting, maybe you every day you eat, you put more glycogen in, but when you fast, your body takes out some. So the goal is you're depleting that glycogen store a little bit every day because you're putting in less than you're taking out. And so eventually you get to the point where your liver glycogen is sufficiently depleted that your body's like, okay, running low on the glycogen now. I really would like to eat something. And then you might feel really terrible for a few days. This might happen at the 3-week point, the 4-week point. You feel worse. You're like, what's happening? Well, that's when your body is like, your body wants easy fuel. Your body is designed to be efficient. It's a lot easier for you to put the fuel in than it is for your body to tap into your fat stores because it's not been used to doing that. So just like you can't run a marathon on day one, you have to do a couch to 5K, work your way up. Same thing with becoming fat adapted. But once your body's like, all right, the glycogen is low. All right, I can burn this fat. I got plenty of it. My insulin's low enough now. Then your body will flip that metabolic switch. You'll start tapping into your fat source. That's when the mental clarity starts to improve. That's when you start to feel better. So you'll know it's happened because every day you have hunger as an intermittent faster. Hunger is a human feeling. We're going to have it. There's no such thing as having zero hunger. But let's imagine today around hour 16. So I'm just throwing that out there. Around hour 16, maybe I'll have a little wave of hunger. And I won't eat because it's not time to eat. I'm not starving. I'm working. I'm doing something. My body will flip that switch, start running on that stored fuel, and then I'm not hungry anymore. So Our 16, maybe a rule of thumb, 12, I've seen that thrown around as well, but it really just depends on how active you are, how metabolically healthy you are, what you ate the day before. Like if someone went out and had, 4 margaritas the night before, alcohol
Yeah.
can keep you from flipping that switch so early the next day. If you had like an ice cream sundae, obviously you got more sugar that your body's stored away. You're going to have to go through all that. So sugar, alcohol, those can make a difference. That being said, I don't restrict any food that I want to eat. I eat the foods that are delicious. I don't have a giant amount of ice cream, but I have some ice cream if I want to.
Yeah.
You just have to keep in mind it might take you a little longer to flip the switch the next day. So it's really going to be variable.
This has just been so insightful, honestly. It really has. And I think for so many women, maybe this will be the conversation that they listen to make them give it a try. But your advice has been really interesting and really easy to understand. And it isn't always. It does feel like a really confusing world. Looking ahead of the world of intermittent fasting, what developments or research are you most excited about?
I would like everyone to actually look less at the research. When I was early in this, I was like, oh, the research. And there's lots of great studies about intermittent fasting and new ones coming out. And then there'll be some weird one that comes out that actually wasn't really even about fasting, but then it's spun like it was fasting. And that's why it's so confusing. There's so many voices out there saying contradictory things. I would like everyone to be less outwardly focused and more inwardly focused, right? When people develop an intermittent fasting lifestyle that works for them, that feels good, it doesn't matter what other people are telling you. It matters that you're feeling better and you know that you are healthier and you can feel it. You have more energy, you have more endurance, you have more stamina for your day. So you could tune out the external and go inward. That's really the advice I'd like to give everybody. Every single bit of advice, like if I had approached my writing about intermittent fasting the way most people do who write about anything in the health world, I would have put out my exact plan as the plan for you to follow and said, this is how to do it. But I don't think that we're all the same. I believe in bio-individuality, and that's really, really important. And perhaps that's my school teacher background and knowing that not all students learn the same way. We differentiate in the classroom. So why would there be one-size-fits-all diet advice? But when you start looking at every diet book that you buy, other than mine, they all have like a plan. Here is what you do. Here is what you eat. If it's intermittent fasting, here is the time that you eat it. Well, you're reading a plan that was that author's plan for what worked for them, but you can't assume that you're like that person. You have to figure out what works for you, and I want you to feel empowered to do that. I don't think that you should copy exactly what I do. I think people could follow me around, eat like I eat exactly, and have different results than me. Maybe someone does better with lower carb. I do better with a lot of whole food, real carbs. I eat a lot of things like potatoes and rice and beans, and I feel amazing. I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat fruit. But there's someone who may need to have fewer carbs to feel good, and trust that. And so instead of looking to the science or the theory or the experts, you are your expert.
Yeah.
You can figure out what makes you feel great and feel vibrant and feel better. And your results will tell you if what you're doing is working. Like, you mentioned an 8-hour window. And, maybe people have heard, 16-8, an 8-hour window is the best one. Well, an 8-hour window is too much for me. And I overeat if I eat in 8 hours. And I'm hungrier. And I don't flip the metabolic switch. If I only fasted for 16 hours a day, I would never flip that switch. And I would put more food in during the day. So it's about finding that balance that works for you. And no book, no program, no study is going to tell you that. There was a great study, Christopher Gardner. I love the research he does. He's out of Stanford. And he did a study where they were trying to figure out what was better, low fat or low carb or something like that. It was called Diet Fits or something. And they found that when you just took the whole groups, they were pretty much equal, right? Pretty much equal. So if you just looked at the big picture, it was no better. Low fat was no better than low carb. However, when you actually looked at the individual people within it, There were some people who did amazing on the low-fat diet, lost so much weight, but there were people who gained weight on that diet.
Yeah.
There were people who lost weight on the low carb. There were people who gained weight on the low carb. And so to me, the wisdom is not what was the average, but what happened for each individual person.
Yeah.
And that's where the empowerment comes in figuring out what works for you. So if you just looked at the overarching, result of that study, you could say, oh, it doesn't matter. Neither is better. But you would be missing that actually low carb was better for some of the bodies and low fat was better for some of the bodies. And low fat was terrible for some of the people, and low carb was terrible for some of the people. And that's where the true wisdom is realizing it's not one size fits all, and feel empowered to trust yourself rather than, read the abstract of a study. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. And I think that ties perfectly with our message at the House of Hormones, which is always to advocate for yourself, and it's always to educate yourself. And I think, that's what we're trying to do here with these podcasts, is to get as many expert opinions as we can, because you're absolutely right. It's not one size fits all. And what works for one person might not work for someone else, but give it a go and see what works for you in a safe way. But thank you so much, Gin. I mean, thank you for sharing about your podcast and your books. Of course, we will link all of these below so people can find them really easily if they want to hear more from you. And they can obviously follow you on Instagram. But we really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this and sharing your time, because, I mean, it is something that I like to do, and it is something that I like to try and encourage others to try. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. I loved it. And remember, everybody, fast clean. Take that clean fast challenge. Even if you think I'm nuts, try it. I promise it makes a difference.
Oh, Gin Stevens, thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode today, don't forget to like and subscribe to the House of Hormones podcast. Your support really does help us reach more people and spread the word about women's health. If you want to stay connected, follow us on our social media. And here's something really important. We're on a mission to secure more funding for women's health initiatives. Sign our government petition today and help us amplify our voices for better healthcare resources and support. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for being part of our journey. We can't wait to see you in the next episode.